When my father died, I thought we'd grieve together, but my sister had other plans: secret wills, a stolen inheritance, and a betrayal so cold it shattered everything I believed about family. What she didn't know was I wasn't about to go quietly. I was going to uncover every lie and take back what was mine. I found out my dad was dead from a voicemail, not from my sister, not from the hospital, not from anyone in the family who should have had the decency to pick up the phone and say it to my face, just a clipped robotic message from the hospital saying Mr. John Walters passed away at 6:47 a.m. And that was it. No condolences, no contact, no nothing. And the worst part is I wasn't even surprised, not really, because that's the kind of family I come from, the kind that smiles at you while they slowly twist the knife. I sat on the porch in my flannel shirt and muddy boots staring out over the cornfield Dad and I had worked on for most of my life, trying to feel something, but all I could feel was cold, and not from the wind either. I called my sister Jenna right after, or tried to. Anyway, and it went straight to voicemail, same thing 3 times that day, and again the next, and when I finally did get her on the line 2 days later she sounded like she was mid-manicure or sipping a latte or whatever rich suburban moms do when they forget they used to be country girls. I said, "Dad's dead, Jenna," and she said, "Yeah, I know," like we were talking about a rerun on TV, like it was something she'd been expecting. Then she followed it up with, "I've got the lawyer sorting everything out, so don't stress yourself." And that's when my stomach turned because I hadn't even asked about the will yet, but somehow she was already in control. Now let me rewind for a second and give you some backstory. I grew up on that farm, lived there till I was 28, worked alongside my dad every damn day, hauling feed, repairing fences, birthing calves in the middle of the night with nothing but a flashlight and sheer stubbornness. I stayed even when Mom died and Jenna moved out, stayed when times were tough, when bills piled up, when droughts hit, when Dad's arthritis got so bad he couldn't lift a shovel. I stayed and ran that place while Jenna went off to college in Boston, married some tech guy with a clean jawline and 0 calluses, and forgot all about us, only dropping in once a year to take selfies with the barn like it was some charming backdrop for her influencer life. And every single time she showed up she acted like the place was hers, like she'd built it, like she had any idea how many winters I spent breaking ice out of water troughs or sleeping in the barn with a sick heifer. And when Dad got sick a few months back, real sick, he made it clear that he wanted to rewrite the will. He told me straight up that he wanted me to have the land, not out of favoritism but because I was the one who kept it alive, who knew every inch of soil and every old repair trick, because Jenna didn't care, and he knew it. But here's the kicker: when I went to bring it up to him again, maybe 2 weeks before he passed, he seemed off, like confused, like he didn't even remember saying it. And then I found out Jenna had flown in for a visit that week while I was gone on a supply run, said she just wanted to check in on him, brought her kids and everything, played the loving daughter, and suddenly the conversation about the will was off the table. I didn't push it then, not as hard as I should have, because I figured I'd get the chance later, and I regret that more than anything. Because when I showed up at the reading of the will, in a law office I didn't even know existed, with a lawyer I'd never met, and Jenna sitting there like she'd won the damn lottery, I realized I was too late. The will had been changed, completely rewritten, and everything, I mean every acre, every structure, every machine, every penny of the account tied to the land, it all went to Jenna. I got nothing, not even the tractor Dad had promised me when I was 15, and you might be thinking this is where I blow up, where I start yelling and flipping tables and demanding justice, but I didn't. I just sat there staring at her while she smiled at the lawyer and nodded and pretended like this was all perfectly normal, like she hadn't stolen a legacy right out from under me, like she hadn't manipulated a dying man into handing over everything to the daughter who hadn't lifted a finger in 15 years, and I knew, deep in my gut, that this wasn't just shady, it was criminal, but I didn't have proof, not yet, so I left, didn't say a word, drove back to my little rental on the edge of town and sat on the front step trying to breathe through the anger in my chest, and that's when I started digging, not literally, not yet, but through phone records, property logs, medical reports, bank activity. I started tracking everything Jenna had done from the moment she stepped foot on that farm last, and it didn't take long before things started stinking, like how the original lawyer Dad had used for decades had been replaced out of nowhere just 3 weeks before he died, or how a large withdrawal had been made from his personal account and gifted to Jenna's husband's failing startup, or how there were strange gaps in the medical care notes where it seemed like Dad hadn't been given his full treatment dosage. And I know, it's dark to think your own sister would undercut your father's health just to slide into his inheritance, but I've seen Jenna do worse to strangers, and the more I uncovered, the more I realized she'd planned this for a long time. This wasn't a crime of opportunity, it was a damn campaign. She'd buttered him up, isolated him, made sure I wasn't around, made him question things, used his meds against him, and then when he was just confused enough, she slid a pen in his hand and got what she wanted. And now she was sitting on the farm like a queen, planning to sell it to some out-of-state developer for millions and turn the place into a golf course or a wedding venue or some garbage like that. And I decided then that if no one else was gonna stop her, I would, not just for me, not just for what was fair, but for Dad, because he didn't work 60 years in the dirt for it to be bulldozed into a parking lot. And that's when I came up with the plan, not a simple lawsuit, not begging the courts or pleading with lawyers. No, I was going to unravel everything, every lie, every fake signature, every forged medical note. And when I was done, she was going to lose more than the farm, she was going to lose the fake life she built on top of it. So I started where any good revenge plan starts, with the paperwork, because no matter how clean a job looks on the outside, there's always a messy trail underneath, especially when greedy hands get involved. I drove 2 hours to the old county office where the original will had been filed years ago, before Jenna ever got her polished fingers near it, and sure enough, there it was. A plain but solid document written up by Dad's longtime lawyer, Mr. Bingham, who was now retired and living in Arizona, but the file was public record, so I sat in the fluorescent-lit room with the buzzing ceiling fan flipping through the pages and feeling my stomach tighten with every line, because it was all there, the land, the assets, the house, every piece of it was meant to go to me, with Jenna getting a small cash inheritance and some jewelry from Mom, exactly the way Dad had always said he wanted it. But then I found the updated version, filed just days before his death, with a whole different lawyer from a firm out of Chicago, and it was clean, too clean, like someone had wiped every smudge off it until it gleamed with fake legitimacy. And that's when I knew this wasn't just some manipulation of a sick old man, this was a full-on fraud operation. So I called every damn doctor that had seen Dad in those last few weeks, and most of them wouldn't talk, but one nurse named Melissa remembered me from when I used to bring Dad to his appointments, and she let it slip that during the final month of his life, Jenna had insisted on moving him to private care at home with her recommended team, and that's when everything got shady. No notes, no updates, no proper medical logs, just an empty stretch of time where apparently Dad's condition deteriorated so fast he couldn't even speak clearly by the end, which made zero sense because I'd talked to him just a month before and he'd still been walking around the house and telling dirty jokes under his breath like always. So I tracked down the private nurse Jenna had hired, a guy named Steve who now worked at a wellness clinic about 40 minutes away, and when I walked in there and asked for him, the receptionist looked nervous, like real nervous, told me he didn't work there anymore and wouldn't give me a forwarding number, but I left my contact info anyway, and later that night I got a call from a blocked number, and a low voice on the other end said, "I can't talk long, but you're right to be suspicious," and then he hung up. And I swear I sat there staring at my phone for 10 minutes straight, because that was it, that was the confirmation I needed. Someone had helped Jenna make Dad worse, maybe not kill him outright but drug him, mess with his treatment, confuse him until he signed whatever she shoved in front of him. I knew that was hard to prove, almost impossible without a confession or a paper trail, but I had enough now to get a lawyer involved, so I did. A local guy named Amos Bailey who used to do land disputes but had a nose for family fraud. And when I told him what happened, showed him the original will and the altered one, gave him the names, the dates, the strange medical gap, he leaned back in his chair and said, "Well, son, you just stepped into a hornet's nest, but lucky for you, I've got a strong net." We started digging deeper, subpoenaed the original lawyer in Chicago, who turned out to be a flashy real estate guy, not an estate lawyer at all, and under pressure he admitted Jenna's husband had contacted him first, not Dad, and had arranged everything over email with instructions from the family, which smelled rotten from the get-go. Meanwhile I kept playing dumb with Jenna, calling her up and pretending like I was trying to be civil, asking if I could stop by the farm just to say goodbye to the place, and she said sure in that sugary voice that makes your skin crawl. So I did. I walked through the house where I grew up and tried not to punch the walls, saw the new paint colors, the new furniture, the expensive kitchen upgrades, the way she'd erased every trace of Dad's personality from the place like she couldn't wait to pretend we'd never been poor or southern or real. She even had one of those fake farmhouse signs over the dining table that said "Bless this nest," and I almost gagged. I asked her about Dad's last days, tried to get her talking, and she said something weird, something I held onto real tight. She said, "Well, you know how he got, he was confused. thought you were mad at him, didn't even want to see you that last week, and that floored me, because Dad would have never said that, not unless someone had planted it in his head. And I realized she'd been poisoning more than just his meds, she'd been poisoning his mind too, turning him against me, rewriting the story while he was still living it, and it made me sick. So I thanked her, left, and handed that exact quote over to Amos, who added it to our file. And then something amazing happened. A neighbor, old Mr. Calhoun, who lived across the field and had known our family since before I was born, showed up at my door with a coffee can full of receipts and notebooks. Turns out he'd been helping Dad manage his feed deliveries and vet appointments when things got bad, and he'd kept records, real ones, that didn't match anything in the final estate documents Jenna had submitted, and buried in those notes was something wild. A scribbled line in Dad's handwriting that said, "Must remember to call Amos about the update. Jenna's pushing too hard," with a date 3 days before he supposedly signed the new will. And that was the crack we needed. We now had reason to believe the new will was forged, not just manipulated but straight up faked. And the case started rolling fast. Amos filed an injunction to block the sale of the farm, which Jenna had already put on the market, by the way, and when she got served those papers, she called me in a full rage, said I was trying to destroy her life, that Dad had always wanted her to have the land, that I was just bitter because I had nothing of my own, and I'll admit, that stung, because she wasn't just talking about property, she was throwing every failure I'd ever had in my face. But I let her rant, let her dig her own grave. Because what she didn't know was that we'd gotten a handwriting expert to look at the signature on the new will, and he confirmed it didn't match any of Dad's other legal documents. And when we finally got the deposition with that shady lawyer from Chicago, he crumbled under oath, said he'd never spoken to Dad directly, only to Jenna and her husband, said he assumed Dad had agreed verbally, and the judge damn near laughed out loud. We were winning, piece by piece, lie by lie, we were pulling the whole thing apart. And even though it didn't bring Dad back, and even though it didn't erase the hurt, it felt like justice was finally warming up in my bones. The day we went to court for the preliminary hearing, I swear I could feel Dad's presence sitting on the bench beside me, like he was finally getting to watch Jenna answer for what she'd done. The courtroom wasn't anything fancy, just a small room with peeling paint and a judge who looked like he'd rather be fishing, but to me it felt like the center of the damn universe. Jenna walked in wearing this beige power suit like she was on her way to a corporate photo shoot, and she didn't even glance my way, just kept her nose in the air while her lawyer, some smug guy from out of town, smirked like the whole thing was beneath him. But the second Amos laid out our evidence, the room shifted. He showed the original will, the timeline, the nurse's strange disappearance, the block number that confirmed something shady had gone down, and then he handed over the handwriting analysis, the financial transfers from Dad's account to Jenna's husband's failed startup, and finally, the kicker, Mr. Calhoun's records and the note in Dad's handwriting that clearly proved he'd planned to revisit the will and had been pressured by Jenna. I watched her face go pale under all that courtroom lighting, like the blood just drained out of her, and for once, she didn't have some smug comment ready. Her lawyer tried to argue it was all circumstantial, that families fight all the time, that Dad had changed his mind at the last minute, but the judge wasn't having it. He said there was enough doubt to freeze the sale of the farm, launch a full investigation into potential forgery, and re-examine the estate documents with a special probate review. And Jenna lost it right there in the courtroom, started crying and saying I was ruining her life, that she had children, that I was tearing the family apart, and I wanted to stand up and yell that she'd already done that the moment she used our father's last breath as leverage. But I didn't. I just watched her unravel while the judge scheduled the next hearing and warned her lawyer to be prepared for criminal implications if anything we claimed turned out true. After court, I walked out into the parking lot and let the cold air hit my face. It felt like breathing for the first time in weeks, like I'd been underwater and suddenly broke the surface. And Amos clapped me on the back and said, "We're not done, but we're damn close." And that night, I drove back to the farm, parked just outside the fence line and sat there staring at it. The way the porch light glowed faint against the dark sky, the way the trees rustled in that same old rhythm they had when I was a kid sneaking out of my bedroom window, and I knew then that I wasn't just fighting for land or money, I was fighting for memory, for meaning, for all the invisible things Jenna had tried to erase when she turned our family name into a transaction. The next few weeks were a blur of depositions and paperwork and long nights sorting through every little detail, and I'll admit there were moments I wanted to quit, moments I looked at myself in the mirror and thought maybe I should just walk away, let her have it, build a new life somewhere else. But every time that thought crept in, I remembered Dad's hands, calloused and cracked from years of labor, and the way he used to look at that land like it was more than dirt, like it was history, and I couldn't walk away from that, I wouldn't. Then one morning Amos called me and said we had something new, something big. The handwriting analyst had taken a deeper look and found that the signature on the new will wasn't just forged, it was traced, literally traced, probably from an old tax form or deed, and even better, the pen pressure was inconsistent, like someone had gone over the lines more than once, and with that, we had enough to request a full forensics report and bring criminal charges against Jenna if the probate court ruled in our favor, and sure enough, when the second hearing rolled around, the forensic expert testified that the signature was highly likely to be fraudulent, and the judge ordered the will invalidated pending a new hearing to determine rightful ownership. Jenna sat there like a stone statue, not crying this time, not yelling, just frozen, because she knew it was over, knew the game was up, and I couldn't even feel joy in that moment. I just felt hollow, like I'd lost so much time, so much peace, just trying to undo the damage she'd done. And then after court she came up to me in the hallway, looking tired and stripped of all her usual polish, and she said, "You don't understand, I needed the money, Mark, I needed it for my kids, for their schools, our house, everything was falling apart." And I looked her dead in the eye and said, "Then you should have asked for help, not stolen a man's life while he was dying." And I walked away, not because I hated her, but because I finally realized that people like her, they'll always justify what they do, always twist it so they can sleep at night, and I wasn't gonna play therapist to someone who tried to bury me under lies. The final hearing came 2 weeks later and the judge ruled that the original will was valid, that the revised one was null due to fraud, and just like that, the farm was mine, legally and publicly, and Jenna was ordered to vacate the property within 30 days. Her lawyer managed to keep her from facing criminal charges in exchange for surrendering her claim and paying back a portion of the misused funds, which honestly felt like a mercy she didn't deserve, but I let it go, because at the end of the day, I wasn't looking to ruin her, I just wanted back what was rightfully mine. And when I finally stepped back onto that porch with the keys in my hand and the weight of all those months behind me, I felt something I hadn't felt in years, peace, not just because I'd won, but because I'd done it without becoming like her, without breaking who I was. Moving back into the farm wasn't this glorious victory lap like I thought it would be. It was quiet and heavy and kind of sad at first. The walls still smelled like that fancy citrus cleaner Jenna probably used to erase the scent of Dad's old pipe tobacco, and the kitchen had one of those cold gray quartz countertops that looked more like a magazine spread than a place to make biscuits. I stood in the living room for a long time that first night just looking around, trying to feel something other than tired, and when I finally walked into Dad's old room, I lost it, not loud or dramatic, just sat down on the edge of his bed and cried like a kid. Because even though I'd won, even though the land was mine again, he was still gone, and there was this echo in the house that nothing could fill, like a part of it had died with him and would never come back. I slept in my old bedroom that night, same one I'd had since I was 7, with the creaky floorboard near the window and the little scorch mark on the wall from when I tried to hang Christmas lights inside as a teenager, and I don't know if it was the old mattress or just the exhaustion in my bones, but I slept deeper than I had in months. And when I woke up to the sun coming through the cracked blinds and the sound of birds in the field, something inside me started to settle, like maybe this place could feel like home again, not because it was familiar but because I could finally breathe without wondering what Jenna was plotting. Over the next few weeks I tore out everything she'd installed, painted over those beige walls, pulled up the laminate floors she'd glued down over the old hardwood, brought the house back to what it had been when Mom was alive, not just for nostalgia but because I needed to see proof that all the fake gloss she tried to layer over our family history could be scrubbed away. And let me tell you, pulling that house back from the edge, it felt like resurrection, like I wasn't just rebuilding a home but reviving something sacred. I found boxes of Dad's stuff in the attic that Jenna had shoved into a corner like it didn't matter, old letters, his army jacket, a broken watch I remembered him wearing when I was a kid, and tucked into one of the boxes was a note he'd written but never mailed, addressed to me. It wasn't long, just a few sentences scrawled in his scratchy handwriting that said, "I know you've carried this place on your back longer than you should have, I'm sorry. I didn't say it enough, I'm proud of you." And I sat there in that dusty attic holding that note like it was gold, because that was what I needed more than any ruling or deed or courtroom victory. I needed to know he saw me, that he knew what I gave up to keep this place running. And with that weight lifted off my chest, I started planning what to do next. The farm had been running on fumes the last couple of years, the equipment was old, the fields needed work, and I didn't have the kind of cash to just snap my fingers and make it all right. But I had time and I had grit and I had neighbors who remembered what the Walters name used to mean around here, Mr. Calhoun came by with a truckload of seed and said, "Your dad'd want you to keep this land alive," and I nodded even though my throat was too tight to answer. And the next day one of the Walker boys came over and helped me repair the north fence, then a few others offered to pitch in, not because they pitied me, but because they respected what I was doing, and that made all the difference. I started small, planted just one section that first season, put out feelers at the local market, talked to folks about buying direct instead of running it all through corporate distributors like before, and slowly things started turning around. It wasn't flashy and it wasn't fast, but every little success felt like a step forward, like I was stitching together something real again. And here's the part that surprised me the most: I didn't hate Jenna anymore. I didn't forgive her either, not in the way that people like to say when they want to sound noble, but I let go of the venom, because carrying it around was like swallowing poison and expecting her to die from it. And the truth is, she already lost more than she knew. She lost the respect of everyone who mattered, she lost the right to call this land home, and no amount of money or modern kitchen cabinets could ever replace what she'd traded away. And sometime around mid-spring, I got a letter in the mail, no return address, just my name scribbled on the envelope. And when I opened it, I found another note from Jenna, shorter this time, no tears or excuses, just 5 words: "I shouldn't have done it," and I didn't write her back, didn't even think about it for long. I just folded the note and stuck it inside that same box with Dad's things, because that's where it belonged, with the rest of the mess we all carry from the people we love. And you know what? That summer the corn came in better than it had in 5 years, the sky was clear, the rain came steady, the barn roof held through the worst storm we'd had since 2012. And I found myself sitting on the porch one evening, drinking black coffee out of Dad's old chipped mug and watching the sun dip behind the fields, and for the first time in what felt like forever, I wasn't waiting for the other shoe to drop, I wasn't bracing for another betrayal or scanning the horizon for trouble, I was just there, alive and steady and home. Thanks for watching. If you liked the story, hit like, subscribe, and stay tuned for more crazy twists. See you in the next one.